Good evening and welcome to the Strand. I'm Christina Foxley, the Director of Events, and I'm pleased to welcome editor Wayne Hoffman and some of the contributors to the book, What We Brought Back, Jewish Life After Birthright. Wayne Hoffman is Deputy Editor of Next Book Press, which publishes the Jewish Encounters book series. His first novel, Hard, came out in 2006, and his second novel, Sweet Like Sugar, is due out in August. His short stories and essays appear in such collections as Best Gay Stories 2010, I Like It Like That, and Mama's Boy. In 2008, he went on Birthright with Shorashim, thus becoming the world's oldest Birthright participant. I'll let Wayne formally introduce his colleagues and talk a bit about the book in a moment, but first some logistics. Following tonight's reading, the participants would be happy to take your questions. They'll then sign personalized copies of the books for you, which you can purchase downstairs on your way out of the store. There are some signed copies up here now if you can't wait until the end. Please join me in welcoming Wayne Hoffman, Eric Levin, Shoshana Rubin, Mordecai Sheinfield, and Jake Marmer to the Strand.
Hi there, I'm Wayne Hoffman. I edited this anthology, What We Brought Back. Thanks for coming out tonight and braving the potential as yet non-existent snow. First, I want to thank Tablet Magazine, which has sponsored tonight's event and actually sponsored all of the readings for this anthology. If you don't know what Tablet Magazine is, I'm going to tell you. Tablet Magazine is a new Jewish magazine online. The name is Tablet. It's online, updated hourly, if you can believe it. If you have not had a chance to check it out, I recommend that you do. I'm going to send around a sign-up sheet, which is free, and I promise we won't sell your name to anyone else. So if you sign up, you'll start getting a daily digest from Tablet Magazine, telling you about the latest trends in Jewish arts, news, and culture. If you're curious, Tablet Magazine has been around for about 1.5 years. It has already won a National Magazine Award for its podcast, beating out a couple magazines you may have heard of called Vanity Fair and The New Yorker. So we're not joking around. Tablet Magazine, please sign up on the sign-up sheet that's going around, and you'll start getting your daily digest. So thanks to Tablet. Now on to What We Brought Back. This is a collection of work by alumni of Taglit Birthright Israel trips. If you don't know what Taglit Birthright Israel is, it's a nonprofit organization that sends young Jewish people aged 18 to 26 on free 10-day trips to Israel on buses. It's quite an experience. If you've been on it, you know. 250,000 people have gone on these trips in the past 10 years, so it's an enormous generational experience in this country and around the world. What we did with this book was not try to put together a collection of what happened on my bus stories. I don't find that all that interesting, especially because most of the what happened on my bus stories are the same. And some of them are not worth telling in mixed company. But what we were looking for with this collection were people telling us interesting things about how they live their lives Jewishly. Before the trip, on the trip, after the trip. What happened to them that made them want to go, what happened in their lives after they got back, and where the trip came in their Jewish journeys. Was it a turning point? Was it a confirmation? Was it a change? Was it an about-face in their Jewish journeys as young people? There are 30-some contributors to the book. They wrote poetry, they took photographs, they wrote monologues, conversations, plays, memoirs. You'll see, or you'll hear 4 of them tonight, and I think you'll get an idea of what the range of pieces that's included in the book is like, and I hope you'll have a chance to talk with the contributors after this reading and pick up the book before you leave and see what the other 25, 26 people in the book had to say. Our first reader tonight is Mordecai Sheinfield. Morty has written about music for Rolling Stone, Spin Magazine, and The Village Voice, so you probably recognize his byline. When he isn't teaching English literature to high school students, he's living uptown in Washington Heights with his wife, Charlotte, and their Siamese cat. Please welcome Mordecai Sheinfield.
I'm going to read a piece called Reaching Nirvana, which is about an unconventional experience I had on a kibbutz during my birthright trip. It was dark already when our bus pulled into a kibbutz outside of Jerusalem. Maybe if you squinted your eyes into the dusk, you could pretend to make out the holy city somewhere in the distance. but mostly what I remember is the smell of the bus, restless, sweating bodies, and the unloading of luggage, the slinging of backpacks, knapsacks, bleary-eyed passengers' eyes hidden by hoodies. It was innocuous, the kibbutz, a way station, a place between places where we could settle down until we reboarded our bus and pursued Judaism among stones, gorges, and plaques. I think the kibbutz manufactured bulletproof glass. Someone must have told me that. I don't remember seeing the glass, the work lines, the workers. I remember the guest house, and most importantly, I remember what happened that night. Around 9 o'clock, Jason dropped by my room. There wasn't much to do, but my fellow passengers had located the kibbutz bar up the road. I cycled through protest, but he was adamant, and so we set off down a long, winding gravel path that passed by the kibbutz houses and through what looked, in the late evening, to be a quarry. On the opposite side, we located the bar. Nothing more than a carved-out building with cheap neon beer advertisements in the window. It was warm inside, and we, the dozen or so passengers from my trip who had made it to the bar, got to work inebriating ourselves. The bar filled quickly with soldiers and workers. In a back room, men and women played pool, and a solitary couple danced to the music. The soundtrack was 90s American alternative rock. Green Day, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Pearl Jam, The Smashing Pumpkins. It was oddly displacing. We were 6,000 miles from home, but drinking American beers and listening to rock music inscribed in our American souls. Nearing midnight, a group of soldiers began to mosh to the sounds of The Offspring, and I joined in. The discrepancies in our physical forms were obvious. Me, with my scrawny Ashkenazi New York frame, my curly hair, my glasses, built twice my size. They all sported buzzed haircuts and white t-shirts. At one point, one of the soldiers yelled at me over the music to be careful while moshing. He was afraid of crushing me. Still, with a belly full of alcohol and a lifetime of concert attendance, I had the hubris of a music fan. I was sure nothing could hurt me here. My own inauguration into music fandom years earlier had coincided nicely with my inauguration into Jewish manhood. Around age 13, I discovered Nirvana. A friend, appalled at my lack of music knowledge, prescribed Smells Like Teen Spirit, and I ate it up. The movement of the song, the disaffected but furious tone, that music video of anarchist cheerleaders, hooked me up to every other youth who had ever played that album. Suddenly, in that kibbutz bar, late, so late at night, the room hot from the moving bodies, the speakers with maybe a touch too much bass, those power chords kicked in, Kurt Cobain began to sing, and everyone lost their minds. Load up on guns and bring your friends, he mumbled, and everyone crashed into each other like beads in a shaken aluminum can. Cobain had been dead for over a decade at this point, but the music was alive, and at one point I climbed up onto one of the bar stools and, looking into a crowd of hands held aloft, I threw myself onto the crowd. The soldiers caught my moving body, and forming devil horns with my hands, I held my arms aloft until my fingers could touch the ceiling. I screamed along with a few dozen men and women until my voice was hoarse and my throat ground raw. They'd taken us to these places, monuments to pay respects to the dead, down paths where they claimed King David had once walked, and into the homes of prime ministers to see their private studies. The idea was that by seeing these places, by walking these geographies, we'd connect with the land and the people who live there. But places are dead things. They have no pulse, no heartbeat. I found it hard to love a stone or to love a grave, but when those Israeli soldiers held me so high that my fingertips touched the corky, scraped, and degraded ceiling, when I could feel the body of the person next to me collide into my own, I loved Israel. The evening was incidental to the trip. Serendipitous to find that the song that gave me love for music could give me love for a country. This isn't some cliche about how music can bring people together, or about how you need to dance with someone to really know them. It's more about the phenomenological moment when I discovered that intimate in a place far from home, and it made this place feel like home too. A few days later, they took us on an officially sanctioned excursion to a club near Ben Yehuda Street. It was cold and empty, like a shell of the time before, and the crowds at different birthright trips mingling seemed almost opportunistic. Maybe the Nirvana experience worked explicitly because it wasn't pre-planned. Israel feels like a country that muddled its way to where it is, dragging alongside it the issues and peoples and moments that never got resolved. It's like the opposite of the perfect grids in New York City. It's a country of incidentals and almost misses and chance moments never again replicable. Winding roads that lead to shanty bars and midnight mosh pits where people have epiphanies long after they should have been in bed. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I find it hard. It's hard to find. Oh well, whatever. Never mind.
Thank you, Morty. One of the great things about working on an anthology like this is that you have a chance to work with people, some of whom you've known for years, some of whom you're just meeting for the first time tonight, some of whom have published widely, and some of whom are publishing for the first time. I'm thrilled to have someone here tonight who's published for the first time in this book, which I think is terrific. Her name is Shoshana Rubin. Shoshana is an Emmy Award-winning television news writer and producer living on Long Island. She went to Israel with Birthright in 2006 and is currently freelancing for Fox News and Patch.com. Please welcome Shoshana Rubin.
Okay, my story is called In Flight.
Speak up, please.
I was on a plane, an El Al flight back to New York, sitting in between a man who'd left New York years before to live in Israel and was playing on his laptop, and a girl much more religious than I could ever be. She was sitting to my right, praying. She really was. She had a little prayer book, and she was davening, and I didn't know what she was doing. I wanted to talk to her. Somehow that urge one gets to make conversation with the person sitting next to you, as long as they seem decent, like not a serial killer weirdo. She seemed pretty sane, except she never put that prayer book down, and I never spoke to her. Not even a hello. I think that's all I wanted. Some kind of acknowledgement, you are my fellow traveler, hello, and that would have been sufficient. But not even that. In front of me were several elderly religious men. I think they were religious because they had long beards and wore black coats. I could be wrong, but it was summer, June. Maybe not technically summer yet, but it felt like summer. They were facing me. I'm not sure why, because on a plane you'd think that every row would face the front, but not on this plane. They were looking right at me. I was wearing a red tank top covered with a dark blue Israel Defense Forces sweatshirt. I bought it in Jerusalem, the day I'd found out I'd be sleeping in a Bedouin tent in the desert, and that it would get cold, and all I had was short sleeves. Except, of course, for the white shirt I bought, the one with the long sleeves, that I bought specifically to wear to the Western Wall. I figured it was good because despite the sweltering heat, it was thin, yet long, so I wouldn't have my arms exposed. It was the perfect shirt, just not good for sleeping in the desert. I was glad I had my sweatshirt on the plane. The plane was cold, or so I thought. Then, the flight took off. I was sad, devastated actually. After 10 days in a country I'd never seen before, I felt I wasn't ready to leave. Not even close. These thoughts were with me when the food was served, and I didn't eat it. I couldn't. I don't know where it came from, 2 hours into a 12-hour flight. This feeling, this panic, this sense that nothing I put into my mouth would stay down. Suddenly, I felt myself burning up. The sweatshirt that I loved felt like a prison. I ripped it off. The men in front of me seemed to disapprove. Their faces showed an anger that I didn't seem too concerned with. I couldn't be. The girl to my right, she'd ordered a special kosher meal. Glut, I assume, since I think all the food was kosher anyway. Or maybe it wasn't. Her food came after mine. My food was taken away. Hers, placed in front of her, and next to me. Opened. It was chicken. The smell, and I'm sure there was nothing wrong with it, but it crept into me, up my nose, and shot down through my throat, and something inside me rumbled. Excuse me. I almost screamed it. The man with the laptop quickly lifted his computer, twisted his legs into the aisle, and let me go. I ran to the bathroom. It was unoccupied. I got